Hi, and welcome to TRiBE's Toolbox, where you will find tips, tricks, and stories by Black women for Black women. My name is Saschan, and I'm the founder of the Womb Room, the support and information service for women who have reproductive health problems. Whether you've got a visit from your aunt in the Red Hills, the Bloody Buddy, you're riding the cotton pony, or surfing the Crimson Wave, for over half of the population, menstruating is almost an inevitability, yet 1 in 4 of us still don't understand our menstrual cycle. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to be helping you to get better acquainted with yours. So hold on to your tampons, because it's about to get real. The Oxford English Dictionary defines menstruation as the process in a woman of discharging blood and other material from the lining of the uterus at intervals of about 1 lunar month, from puberty until the menopause, except during pregnancy. It's important to point out that this definition isn't inclusive of trans men who may still have periods, because not everybody who has a period identifies or is a woman, and not all women have periods. The female reproductive system is home to the left and right ovaries. This is where your eggs are stored, matured, and released. The matured egg then travels along the fallopian tube and down to the uterus, more commonly termed the womb. Because menstruation is cyclical, the womb prepares itself for a pregnancy each month, where the uterine lining thickens and becomes soft. If an egg is not fertilized and doesn't implant in your womb, the uterine lining begins to break down and it passes out of your body through your vagina as blood and menstrual tissue. This is your period. The time between one period, or bleed, and the next is called your menstrual cycle, and day 1 of your cycle begins when you start bleeding. The average cycle lasts between 21 and 35 days, but only 10 to 15% of us will have a cycle which is exactly 28 days, with nearly 20% of women, like me, having a cycle that's irregular. This means a cycle that's either shorter or longer. You'll probably notice changes in your body, your mood, and your vaginal discharge throughout your menstrual cycle. This is because your cycle is determined by 4 key phases, and each phase is influenced by a key hormone. Phase 1, menstruation. The official start of your cycle is the first day of your menstrual phase, so that's the day when you start bleeding. Menstrual or period blood is shed from the lining of your uterus. It flows from your uterus through your cervix and vagina, and then out through your vaginal opening. The average period will typically last between 3 and 7 days. It might seem like more, but the average woman only loses about 60 millilitres of blood with each period that she has. But your flow may be different, because each of us is unique. During this phase of your cycle, you might experience cramps, mood swings, and headaches. So if you can, use this time to relax, rest, and recuperate, because managing all these hormones is hard work. Phase 2, the follicular phase. This is the phase where your body begins to prepare itself for pregnancy, and this phase usually lasts around 2 weeks. After your period ends, estrogen begins to tell the lining of your uterus to thicken to prepare itself for a fertilized egg. At the same time, another hormone, follicle-stimulating hormone, stimulates your ovarian follicles to grow. Each follicle contains 1 egg. Usually, once an egg is matured, this will be released in preparation for fertilization each month. Your body produces cervical mucus before an egg is released. This will change throughout your cycle, but during this phase, it's typically white, cloudy, or a little bit yellow, and can often smell a bit sour. This mucus isn't sperm friendly. However, it's best to use protection if you're not trying to get pregnant, because sperm can live inside the body for up to 5 days. This is usually a great time to get work done, meet deadlines, and engage in creative projects, as a lot of menstruators find that they have extra energy and productivity around this time. If you've got estrogen sensitivities or estrogen sensitive conditions, like endometriosis, for example, you're more likely to have feelings of anxiety, restlessness, poor sleep around this time in your cycle. So for you, it's probably advisable to get some rest, cut down on your caffeine, reduce your processed sugars, and maybe engage in some yoga or meditation instead. Phase 3, ovulation. Ovulation marks the end of your follicular phase. Prompted by the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland begins to produce follicle-stimulating hormones. This stimulates your ovaries to produce between 5 and 20 follicles. Each of these follicles will hold an immature egg. Usually, only one follicle will mature into an egg, whilst the other follicles will die. During this phase of your cycle, your cervical mucus will typically look like raw egg whites. It should be clear and stretchy in consistency, usually up to 2 inches. This cervical mucus is ripe and ready for sperm, and it helps the sperm to travel up the vagina for fertilization. At this phase in your cycle, you can typically expect some cramping or maybe even sharp shooting pains in your left or your right side of your pelvis. This can be an indicator that you're ovulating, and a lot of women and menstruators will be able to tell or track their ovulation at this time because of those pains. Phase 4, the luteal phase. During ovulation, the matured egg bursts from the follicle. This follicle then sits on top of the ovary and forms a structure known as the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum produces progesterone and small amounts of estrogen, which encourage the lining of the womb to remain thickened in preparation for any fertilized egg to potentially implant. Here's where 2 things can happen. If you become pregnant, the egg moves into the lining of the uterus and a pregnancy will begin. If not, your progesterone levels will begin to diminish and you'll shed the lining of your womb. This is when your period starts. And essentially, your cycle starts all over again. After ovulation, your discharge is likely to change. It will typically be a little bit more cloudy, more gooey in consistency, and it may return to looking very similar to your discharge in the follicular phase. During the luteal phase, you might notice that you dream more vividly, but you might also be prone to headaches, migraines, symptoms of PMS, feeling very emotional or very angry. And if you've got existing illnesses such as lupus, sickle cell anemia or sickle cell trait, or possibly even fibromyalgia, you might find that a lot of the symptoms of these conditions flare up and get worse. Ultimately, you're the expert on your body. As you have periods and they change and they develop over time, you'll become accustomed to knowing what feels right for you. Sometimes your periods might change because you're stressed or you're taking certain medications, or perhaps you've been unwell with a cold for a long time. If you think that something's wrong intrinsically, then you should get it checked out and do something about it, because you know you better than anybody else does, and that includes the doctor. Nearly every woman in the UK will experience a reproductive or menstrual wellbeing issue at some point during her lifetime. So what do you do when things start to go wrong? If you haven't had a period in a while, this is typically called amenorrhea. This essentially just means the absence of periods. The absence of periods occurs for multiple reasons: weight gain, hormonal disturbances, and sometimes changes to your lifestyle or stress factors. If you have conditions such as polycystic ovarian syndrome, you might also experience amenorrhea quite frequently. If you haven't had a period for over 6 months and you're definitely not pregnant, you should 100% get this checked out by your doctor. If your periods are extremely painful, this is termed dysmenorrhea. Although some mild discomfort is completely normal around or before the time of ovulation and throughout the time that you're bleeding or on your period, if your pain is so significant and severe that it's disrupting your daily life and your ability to do basic tasks like get out of bed or go to work or school, then that's not normal, and it could be an indicator that there's something else more seriously wrong. Sometimes conditions such as endometriosis or fibroids present themselves by being extremely painful at key parts of your cycle. You might want to try using a heating pad to alleviate some of the pain and discomfort, but you can also try some pelvic stretches to help relax the muscles around the pelvic area. If you find that you're regularly bleeding through your pads, your tampons, or your overflow in your menstrual cup, it's safe to say you probably have a heavy flow. If you're changing these more than every 60 minutes, then you've definitely got menorrhagia or heavy bleeding. Heavy bleeding can be caused by a number of factors, including bleeding disorders, endometriosis, fibroids, and polyps, but it isn't limited to these. So if you don't have one of these diagnosed conditions, it's definitely worth keeping a diary and getting this checked out by your doctor just to double check. Bleeding or spotting in between periods can be caused by many different factors. It could be the sign of an untreated sexually transmitted infection, or it could be a condition such as endometriosis, fibroids, polyps, a thyroid disorder, or in some cases, it could be a sign of gynecological cancer. It's important to note that some medications or contraceptives can also trigger bleeding and spotting in between periods. But if you find that this is happening regularly, it's definitely worth consulting your doctor because it's not a normal sign. The list of reproductive and menstrual health conditions that you can struggle with doesn't end here. This is an introduction, not an encyclopedia. So if you think that you've got the sign and symptom that something might be wrong, or you just want more information, you can head over to the womb room to find out more. Before I go, it's important to remember that as Black women, we're typically taught to believe that pain is a normal part of our experience of womanhood, and that it's a normal part of our growth and development as we go through life. This isn't true. If your periods are disrupting your life, if you're experiencing a lot of pain, it's definitely worth getting them checked out. Nobody's asking you to be a martyr for the cause. At the end of the day, your health comes first and is the priority. And statistically, we're more likely to live in poor socioeconomic areas, have reduced access to medical care and doctors, and less likely to seek early intervention and help for any signs and symptoms that something might be wrong. So if you think that something's wrong, don't delay, get it checked out, because you can't put a price on your health, your life, or your reproductive capacity. And more importantly, don't be shy. Talk to your friends, your family, talk to men, talk to women, talk to other people around you who might be experiencing the same things and are just not talking about them. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Having a reproductive health problem, bleeding every month, and even infertility, they're facts of life, but they don't have to be your whole life. Thanks for joining us for this episode of TRiBE's Toolbox. Make sure you like and subscribe. Comment down below and tell us what you've learned from this video. And don't forget to check out the other videos in the TRiBE Toolbox as well.